Excelente día, nos encontramos con Kevin Ali, el director general, CEO de Organon, compañía que recientemente se escindió de Merck. Y muchas gracias por compartirnos estos minutos, Kevin, para platicar con el Economista, con nuestra audiencia, acerca de los desafíos de la empresa en México y sus perspectivas a futuro.
It's a pleasure to be with you, and it's a pleasure here to tell you a little bit about some of the things that we're doing at Organon.
Gracias. Es un placer tenerte aquí, un placer que nos hayas dado unos minutos para platicar con el Economista. Y me gustaría comenzar, ¿qué es lo que hace atractivo México para Organon, el mercado mexicano? ¿Qué tendencias de mercado identifican en México que son atractivas para el negocio de Organon?
So Mexico has historically been one of the key markets, not only for MSD, which we came out of, but also now for Organon, because of the fact that there are a number of advantages in Mexico for us as a company. We have, first and foremost, access to a very talented workforce, both for our manufacturing facility, Xochimilco, which is one of our 6 manufacturing facilities around the world we have in Mexico, as well as for many other functions that we can get access to that talent pool. So Mexico has a fantastic talent pool for us to draw from, number one. Number two, it is a growing economy in the sense that there's some investment in healthcare. So, people want quality, access to quality medicines, whether it's from women's health products that we have, all the way to what I would call trusted, established brands that we have, and potentially the future for biosimilars as well, in an ability to provide these unique assets or products at a much lower cost to the Mexican government. So the second thing, as we said, is first thing is talent. Second thing is a growing opportunity with the market, because the population in Mexico, like many other countries, is aging. And so there are more chronic medical needs that we can provide. And the third thing really is the proximity to all the things both in South America, Central America, as well as North America. So the geographic proximity is very strong for us. The talent is very strong. And the opportunities in the market, given where the population is moving, also provides strength for us to invest in.
En términos del tamaño del mercado, ¿qué representa para los ingresos de la compañía y para sus ganancias?
So currently, what I would consider Mexico is part of our Lamera region, which is Latin America, Middle East Africa, and Russia. And so it's a very big region. Almost kind of what I would consider part of the old emerging markets definition. And I would say that right now, Mexico is the second leading market, Brazil and Mexico, as the second leading markets for the Lamera region. A market that we feel very strong as growth prospects for the future. And so right now it's a strong market. In terms of overall contribution to Organon, it's probably in the single digits, but ultimately we have opportunities to grow here.
Organon tiene un portafolio diversificado de productos. Eso hace a la compañía fuerte, interesante. ¿Cuáles son, en el caso del mercado mexicano, las áreas de mercado que son, hablando de terapias, que son más atractivas? Sabemos que Organon se enfoca en la salud de la mujer, por ejemplo. Entonces, digamos, ¿cuáles serían esas terapias y esas áreas específicas que resultan de mayor interés para Organon?
So for Mexico, I believe that our women's health focus, both in terms of the products we have today in our hands, Implanon NXT, which is reimbursed by the Mexican government, but also other contraceptive businesses, as well as our fertility business, is something that can continue to grow in Mexico. So it's a key, it aligns very well The focus of women's health and what are the needs in Mexican patients is a very nice alignment to what we're doing in Organon. But going forward, in terms of the future, what does the future hold for Organon in Mexico? We believe some of the recent acquisitions that we've made in business development for endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, preterm labor, and our first acquisition of Lydia Health for the treatment of postpartum hemorrhage, which happens in Mexico far too often, is something that we hopefully will bring to Mexico soon, because we have FDA approval, we've already commercialized it in the US, and now we want to try to bring it to Mexico as well so that we can save women from the debilitating effects of hemorrhaging during pregnancy, during delivery. And so we believe that going forward into the future, as there's more and more focus of the Mexican government on supporting women and women's health, both in terms of reproductive health, but also in terms of management of things like endometriosis and other things, will be a really nice combination or a nice alignment of what we're trying to do and what the Mexican people and women in Mexico really want for their future as well. So I think there's a tremendous alignment of needs and what we're doing with regards to our own development of our pipeline here in Mexico.
¿Cuáles son las oportunidades que ven, digamos, dados los planes del gobierno mexicano de tener un sistema de salud único, centralizar las compras de terapias farmacéuticas? ¿Cuáles son las oportunidades que se abren en un mercado, repito, como el mexicano, en donde hay un gasto privado en salud muy alto, a diferencia de otros países?
So what's happening in Mexico is not uncommon to what you see in other markets, where you have a public system, where there's public reimbursement of certain what I would call essential drugs, and then there's a private market emergence as well. For people that want to pay out of their pocket potentially, or maybe even some public or rather private insurance that are available that are starting to emerge in Mexico. And we operate well in that world. Why do I say that? Because we have a portfolio of products that would fit in that essential drug list opportunities for government agencies, like for example Implanon and other products like that. And we also have a portfolio of products that could potentially be very useful for out-of-pocket markets or the private market. Our established brands business, as well as potentially some other businesses that we have. Now again, going forward into the future, I believe there's a great opportunity for biosimilars here in Mexico. And currently, Mexico doesn't have a big biosimilar business. But you do have a lot of expenditures on biologics for things like Humira, Enbrel, Remicade, Herceptin, Avastin, products for immunological conditions and products for oncology. Now, those products, a lot of them are either gone off patent or will go off patent soon, and there's an opportunity for now Mexico to pay much lower cost for these biologics for the purpose of expanding the number of patients who could benefit, that potentially wouldn't benefit before because maybe the products were too expensive, but now as they start to reduce in price, Mexico can offer both in private and public sectors more patients the opportunities to benefit from these products. And that's one of the areas that we're actually in as well. We are in established brands, we're in women's health, and we're in biosimilars. And we have a very vibrant biosimilar business in Brazil, in the United States, in parts of Europe. But right now, Mexico hasn't been a big biosimilar segment. And I think in the future, that's an opportunity to provide at a lower cost for a greater number of patients these very important type of products.
¿Sería posible decir que el área de biosimilares será el segmento o sería el segmento más dinámico y que conduzca el crecimiento de la empresa en México más que de marcas de patente, más que established brands?
So I think there's a couple of opportunities for us to grow in Mexico. Overall, I think that the established brands are growing now as we repatriated the business back from our old partner, and now we have it in our hands. I think that women's health, Implanon, will be an opportunity to go forward. And I think the biosimilars are going to, as you say, going to be a dynamic business going forward to provide us opportunities to continue to grow. But what I will say is that, you know, some of the initiatives that we've done, like yesterday, we signed a memorandum of understanding with both three parties, CONAPO as well as the UNFPA and Organon, to try a kind of an experimentation or sorts of a partnership in Xochimilco to try to reduce the amount of teen pregnancies in Xochimilco as a blueprint, as a program. We think that that potentially could also provide growth for us, because one thing is for the Mexican government, for example, to reimburse Implanon. The second thing, though, is for it actually to be used. Just because something is available doesn't necessarily mean that the patients that require it are getting it. And so what we need to do is we need to increase education in the environment, in these communities like Xochimilco and other communities that kind of surround Mexico City. We need to increase the education, we need to increase awareness to reduce teen pregnancies, for example, or to provide this as a potential option to women who want long-term protection against unintended pregnancies. We need to be able to increase the awareness, to increase education, so that people take advantage of what's already made available, but they're just not taking advantage of it. So that connection between reimbursement and people actually having access to that asset is something we need to bridge that connection. Because let me tell you, during the pandemic, there was an increase in 30% in unintended pregnancies or teen pregnancies in Mexico. What that means is there's 300,000 teen pregnancies in Mexico per year. And what's even more troubling, that there's about 7,500 of that 300,000 are people, are actually teens less than 15 years of age. And the problem with that is that the WHO has already kind of had studies, most recently published recently in 2019, that showed that the number one reason for mortality or death of teenagers is pregnancy and the complications from pregnancy. So put death aside for a moment and just talk about complications. When a child less than the age of 15 actually gets pregnant and has to deliver a child, a baby of her own, things like postpartum hemorrhage we talked about earlier, endometriosis, all types of complications that come as a result because the uterus is not fully formed at that stage of a young child. We need to try to do our best to help the government, to help the patients avoid those complications. And solutions like Implanon, which gives a patient 3 years of protection without worrying, is something that hopefully will address these 300,000 a year of teenage pregnancies that really don't need to happen in Mexico. And so that ultimately you give a female an opportunity to provide the best opportunities for her growth, both in terms of her own choices for being a productive member of society and the economy, but also for the opportunities to not actually have the physical devastation that those things provide, those things happen to.
Acaba de abordar el tema de la pandemia, que es uno de los grandes temas que están condicionando cómo se están reenfocando los negocios. En el caso de Organon, ya me habló de estas problemáticas que atienden las soluciones de la compañía. ¿Qué otras situaciones cambiaron de mercado con la pandemia y cómo está reenfocándose el negocio de Organon para atenderlas?
So, you know, for so many of us, the pandemic has been such an incredible distraction from doing our business, both in terms of the ability for, say, our sales force to speak to physicians, but also for physicians to actually see patients. That's why you've seen such an increase in teen pregnancies, a 30% increase, because people weren't able to go and to get, you know, care. And so now, coming out of the pandemic, what's changed? Well, quite a few things have changed. First of all, the way we do work, the way we do office work. Office work has changed probably forever. We no longer have to look at the business as, you know, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. It's more of a hybrid type of environment. So the whole concept of technology, how does technology play a role in the way that we actually do our business? Both in the way that we communicate with our customers, because now digital channels are starting to emerge, ways of being able to do telemedicine, ways of being able to communicate with our customers has now forever started to expand and change in ways that we thought about it, but we never considered that would be so accelerated as it is today. So I believe going forward, we're still trying to find out how are we going to address these changes in our commercial infrastructure, in our manufacturing site in Xochimilco, in the way that we actually operate our business, and more importantly, in the way that physicians are going to communicate with their patients. That's really where the greatest amount of change is. We can't have a situation where women no longer go to seek care because they're afraid of getting COVID in an office or in a hospital or in a clinic. We have to find ways of being able to bridge the needs of women, especially reproductive needs, with physician in terms of how the services are going to be provided. So just like in the US and in Europe and many other parts of the emerging markets, I believe that Mexico will start to shift more to telemedicine, to digital infrastructure, taking advantage of what we learned during the pandemic, that you need to be more creative in the way that people get their care and are provided, you know, in terms of their care, their medical care.
En términos de negocio, ¿qué es lo que ha aprendido Organon después de este proceso de decisión tan reciente de Merck sobre cómo se debe hacer un proceso de este tipo de forma exitosa?
Yeah, so that's been a tremendous learning experience for me and for all of the founders involved in Organon. Doing a spin is complicated by itself, just by itself, under normal times. But doing a spin in the midst of a pandemic that the world hasn't seen the likes of which over 100 years is added complexity, added difficulty. What I can tell you we've learned at Organon is how to be resilient, how to be creative, how to be scrappy, how to not allow a no as a no, to constantly challenge the way that we do business. And it's been a tremendous learning experience for all of us involved in this spin. We call ourselves founders. Although we're a startup, I believe we're a startup, we're a $6.5 billion startup with 9,500 founders across the world in more than 60 markets that we have physical presence. And we treat it as a startup, which means usually startups are more agile, more innovative, take more kind of what I would call prudent risks than established companies do. We try to embody a startup mentality, you know, experimentation, entrepreneurialism, fast thinking, fast action, you know, experimentation in terms of being more reactive to what's going on in the marketplace, especially with the pandemic. I think that's been a tremendous learning for us. It truly has, and I think it's set us up well to be a resilient company going forward. Because if you're born in a pandemic, you either have two ways: either you're going to fail or you're going to succeed, based on how resilient your employees are. And I think we've developed a really creative, resilient group of people who want to see the vision of this company, a better and a healthier every day for every woman, play itself out, and hopefully create a legacy of a company that people can all feel proud of being part of.
Hablando también de los retos de coyuntura actualmente, ¿cómo está lidiando la compañía con los grandes problemas que nos están aquejando en este momento? Inflación, los cuellos de botella en el sector logístico, y cuál será el impacto al final también en los productos, ¿no? Y en la manufactura.
So like all companies, we obviously are dealing with inflationary pressures on some of our supply chain. Now our drug substance, we in our business, in our manufacturing, or rather in the pharma business, we work with long lead times. We work with larger inventories. So many of the drug substance that we've actually purchased, we purchased long ago. We go with large inventories in order to be able to manage the long lead times we have in manufacturing. So we're not as affected right now with our drug substance costs, but definitely our transportation costs are made more challenging. You know, during the pandemic, shipping was a major issue in terms of the timing of shipping. So you have to be very flexible and pivot. Do you go air? Do you go sea? Do you go land? So you have to be much more flexible, much quicker. But overall, the net is the fact that our costs around our transportation costs are some things that we have to work with. And that's made even more difficult now with the war in Ukraine, because you have shipping costs having to deviate, air costs having to increase. We're dealing with that. Thankfully, it's not a major issue that we have to deal with right now. We're not a fast mover consumer goods company. We're a healthcare company, a pharmaceutical company, biopharmaceutical company. And so along that, we don't have the volume that, say, for example, a fast mover consumer, a consumer goods company would have, where you're talking about in the millions and millions of units that have to travel around the globe. Thankfully, we're not stuck to that. We actually have more of a smaller volume, but we still have to deal with some of these transportation issues. And we feel very confident that we can handle it, we can address it.
Kevin, me gustaría terminar la entrevista preguntándote algo que es fundamental en el enfoque de hacer negocios actualmente, que es el tema de sostenibilidad, gobernanza y el enfoque social. ¿Cuáles son las metas que se ha planteado la empresa en términos, por ejemplo, de descarbonización de sus operaciones? ¿Cuáles son los plazos y cuáles son los avances que hay en ese expediente?
Are we talking about in terms of social issues?
ESG.
Or? ESG.
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 Yeah.
Very good, thank you. Probably you could have just said ESG, I would have known exactly what you mean. So we're unique in the sense that when you think about the ESG parameters, many times it's quite confusing because there's so much news out there, so many different definitions of what ESG means. But our vision itself lends a very high level of credibility to what we're doing. Women's Health Company, better and healthier every day, a vision for every woman in the world, is something that really works towards the S part, the social part, in a very strong way. So the things that we're doing, Implanon, for example, that we have here for unintended pregnancies, in many parts of the world, the low and middle income countries, this is a key product for them. And so we are working very closely, for example, with the Gates Foundation in many of the parts of sub-Saharan Africa and many other countries in the low and middle income countries to provide at a very low cost, basically at cost to us, where we don't make much profit at all, to many of these women across the world. Do you know that we actually distribute more of these rods or more of these implanons to those markets than we sell in the developed world? So it is really a testament to our commitment to be able to provide solutions to many of these markets for things like, for example, unintended pregnancy rates. That's not to mention some of the things that we have now in our pipeline, like the product we have for postpartum hemorrhage. Many of these markets have these issues. We need to provide these products work with our partners like the Gates Foundation in many of these markets. So the S part on the ESG is something we feel very strongly about. Now the G part, in terms of the governance principles of ESG, you know, one of the things that people really are concerned about is gender equity. Gender equity in the decision-making bodies that you have in the company. Our board of directors is made up of 70% women. And 50% of the board has actually either spent time working or lived internationally. So we have not only a very diverse, gender-driven board, with 70% being women, but also a very internationally diverse board. So typically when you have a board that is very diverse, and it is the most diverse board of any healthcare company in the S&P 500. It is the most diverse. That essentially says that from a governance principle, and also my own management team is made up of more women than men. So we have about 55–60% are women on the management team. So we have a very diverse board and a very diverse management structure. That kind of goes and speaks volumes to the governance of what we're trying to do. And in terms of environmental, we have essentially 6 manufacturing facilities, one of them being Xochimilco, and they used to belong to Merck, MSD Merck, and they were invested in very heavily to make sure that we actually make the least amount of impact on the environment and the things that we're doing in that space. So that's just kind of what we're born with, what we're given in terms of where we are as a company. Where we are as a future, well, our 1-year anniversary coming up in June, at the beginning of June next year, or rather this year, we'll make our 1-year anniversary. We're going to publish our ESG report to the world. And in there we'll have more plans and more things that we're going to be doing and communicating on in terms of our ESG principles. But I just wanted to give you an appetizer, a taste of what we're doing on the S, the E, and the G. And I think we're in a good shape for a company of our size and of our maturity, which is only 1 year, that we feel very strong about some of the things that we're doing around the world to make us a very important company in terms of our ESG principles.
Okay. Muchísimas gracias, Kevin. Ha sido una entrevista muy rica en términos de conocimiento y de verdad te agradezco mucho el tiempo que nos has compartido.
Muchas gracias and muchos gusto. Huh? Pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.